Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good fun topic. Let's do it. Truckers. What are some of your best stories from your years on the road? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
At a truck stop, middle of the night, guy next to me starts talking to me. He's 50-ish, short, friendly, and got a bushy mustache. After a moment or two, I noticed that his mustache is actually his nose hairs, which are inches long and obviously combed into the desired mustache shape. I was both fascinated and repelled at the same time. My dad is a truck driver, and he likes to tell a story about a Keebler cookie driver who was getting teased on the CB once. He said that the other drivers kept asking him questions like, "Do elves really make the cookies? And are you an elf? And how tall are you anyway?" Dad says this truck driver let the good-natured ribbing go on for a while, and then he said in a deep voice, "Listen, I only drive this truck for the paycheck. I don't ask any questions. I just back the truck up to the tree and they fill it." My great-uncle was a trucker in and around San Francisco in the 40s, whose route often took him over the huge hills for which the city is known. His truck wasn't all that powerful, so he usually had to stick it into really low gear and crawl up the hills. One day, his little brother, my grandfather, was visiting him, then was sitting in the passenger seat when my great-uncle saw a friend coming up behind him. His friend had a better truck and was able to climb the hill faster, so he was going to be overtaking them soon. My great-uncle had an idea for a prank and had my grandfather take the wheel while he jumped out of the cab. When my uncle's friend passed them, my uncle was behind the truck, pushing it up the hill. I was at a truck stop in Ohio getting fuel. As I'm standing there on the driver's side of my truck watching the fuel gauge add up, this guy walks around the front of my truck and stops about 10 feet from me by my driver's side steer tire. I look over at him, and he's standing there very still, silently, and not blinking. "Can I help you?" I said. No response. "What's wrong with you?" No response. At this time, my hand went to the knife I had clipped on my left pocket, just in case. "What the is wrong with you?" I yelled. He finally responded calmly in an melancholic tone, "Oh, nothing. I just wanted to hear your voice." Then turns away slowly and walks away. I didn't sleep all that night. I was in a pretty bad car accident on my way to college. My grandparents drove me since my parents were working, and I had way too much shit to take on a plane. We were driving on I-80 in Pennsylvania. I was asleep in the back seat, so I'm not exactly sure what happened. We think my grandmother had a minor stroke while driving. In any case, we swerved off the road, rolled over a few times, and smashed up the car and ourselves pretty good. Thankfully, no other cars were involved. I've always wanted to say thank you to the truckers who helped us that day. 3 guys from 3 different trucks ran over to assist. One gave my grandfather a handkerchief to staunch the bleeding on his face. Another sit next to my trapped grandmother and hold her hand until help arrives. Another guy hung out close to me as I sat in the grass in a daze, staring at my effed up knee. I remember that the 2 of us watched all of the earthly possessions as they rolled and scattered on the highway. Anyway, my grandparents and I went to the hospital, and now we're all A-okay. The best thing those truckers did? Those dudes picked up all of my colored pencils from the road. All of them. They were all scratched up and had road grit in them. But those guys took the time to give me back a part of my life. Unbelievable guys. I'll always have complete respect for them. TL, DR. Got in a wreck. Truckers picked up my belongings. Want to hug all truckers. My dad told me this story. Back in the 80s, one of his friends was in the army on a semi carrying WMD. They were going like 15 over, and a rookie state patrolman pulled him over. Due to the nature of their load, they couldn't take chances, so about 10 guys jumped out with rifles and made the patrolman get on the ground until they were able to verify he was really a state patrolman. I always feel that popular films give us guys a bad impression. Not all of us are heavy metal lovers in jagged jeans and rowdy looking. Years on the road have given us a lot of stories and a lot of experiences. The best part is the interstate driving, lots to see, and the ever-waving hands of kids in cars. I have a CB radio that I often use to amuse the children with. For trips lasting more than a day, it's pretty much fun only if you have company. Gas stations and trucker stops are a wonderful meeting point. Most of the time, I have no idea the variety of things I would haul, just in vague terms like merchandising or household goods. Once I was traveling up north and came up behind a car that was going at a steady pace but weaving in and out of lanes. Me and my partner had a guess that the driver was going sleepy, and we tried our best to catch up along the car. We noticed the car had the CB antenna sticking up and were able to get the particular person on CB. We were able to jog awake the person and convince him to take a break. The driver was a doctor who was going upstate to attend a call. Not a trucker, but a farmer. During planting, I worked 15-hour days in the tractor putting seed into the ground, traveling a neck-breaking 4.5 miles per hour. So as you can imagine, tedium starts to set in pretty quick. What always brightened my day were these two rowdy Australian shepherds that would appear randomly and trot alongside my tractor for hours. Every once in a while, they would see a rabbit and bolt in its direction for miles, but always came back to run with my tractor. At the end of the day, I would get out of the tractor and give those boys some of my supper. I would come back the next morning to find them sleeping under my tractor, ready to start the day. Not the most exciting story, but having some companionship on the lonely days spent in the tractor goes a long way. Not a trucker, but a construction worker. Not a super interesting story as much as it is a feel-good one. Part of my job required me to pick up some highway cones, the 28-inch ones, not grabbers. Sometimes it gets pretty scary out there, hanging off the side of the truck going 20 miles per hour while you have traffic going past you at 55 on state routes. When we're doing centerline, the yellow lines, we have a do not pass sign on our truck, which, by the way, is a legal sign that you're required to obey. We're doing our best to pull over when traffic starts to back up. We know we are an inconvenience, but we're just trying to get our job done as fast and safely as possible, so our foreman isn't bitching us out, because sometimes we can be as far back as 10 to 15 miles, depending on the weather, from the paint truck. Well, we're doing a 2-lane highway one day, and no one is staying behind us. They keep passing. I'm hanging off the truck, seeing my death almost happen way too often. I see this oversized load coming up, and while he can fit in the lane just barely, he's in the middle of the road, and it looks like he's going to try and pass us. So I start yelling at my driver to pull over ASAP, which he starts to do. The trucker starts flashing his lights and blows his horn at us with his hand waving forward. At this point, he's maybe 20 to 30 feet off our ass, yelling at me to keep going. He's got traffic control. We drove for 12 more miles with the trucker getting over only when traffic was coming the other way. When we finally had to pull off because the road was done, there was at least 20 minutes of traffic behind him. We had a lot of people yelling at us and flipping us off. Some even threw trash at us, but I didn't care, because I knew that at least one other person on the way cared more about my safety than they did about getting someplace quickly. TLDR, trucker blocked traffic for 12 miles while I did my job. My dad used to be a trucker when I was younger, and I'd often ride along with him. One day, when he was dropping off a load in Lexington, North Carolina, we came across a Jeep that had gotten into a head-on collision with an 18-wheeler carrying full cargo. The only way I can really describe the look of the Jeep is like a game of Jenga after a 2-year-old got a hold of it. There was blood smeared across the pavement, and it was horrifying. The worst part about it was that we were at the front of the traffic right next to the accident when it stopped. So unless you shut your eyes, you couldn't help but constantly gaze at the bloody wake left behind. I've been trucking in the oil field for 2 years now. I narrowly avoided a head-on collision with a single prop plane, had a broken pod blow off a truck in front of me and fire past me at an insane speed. Saw a coworker go into a ditch during a blizzard and jump a lease road and get a good 10 feet in the air. Had a full-loaded 40-ton unit do a complete 360 and stay on the road. I kept going like nothing happened. I've gone down a hill jackknife at 70 km/h and somehow recovered. I've seen some shit, man. I don't have any monkey dog fights in my stories, but I do have 3 that I'll never forget. The first was the time I saw a Ford Escape hydroplane from the number 2 lane across 3 lanes to the right-hand shoulder recover, and then hydroplane from the right-hand shoulder all the way to the inside barrier. After everyone stopped, there was what we thought was debris on the road, but it actually turned out to be the guy and his old lady. The Ford had sandwiched a motorcycle between the concrete barrier and her SUV, and that was a tough one. The second was at a truck stop in Arizona. I was pulling through the fuel island, and right as I was about to leave, roughly 15 cop cars came flying into the parking lot in a SWAT van. They surrounded a truck that was already parked for the night. I heard later that the driver had lost a tire or something off his trailer, and it had killed a guy on the side of the road. I don't know how true the story was, but it sounded possible. The third is the grossest thing I've ever seen in my life. At the TA in Ontario, Canada, I watched a hooker get out of one truck, climb into another truck, get out of that truck, and climb into a third one. By this point, I was so disgusted I just left. I lost the $10 I paid to park there, but I was definitely not staying there the rest of the night. Thankfully, I was able to park at the receivers. I miss driving like crazy. I'll probably do it again later in life. If you ever get the opportunity to do it, it's definitely something not to pass up. Not me, but I took the call as a dispatcher. I had a driver call up at 4 a.m. overnight shift and does not even say hello, just says, "I think I killed someone." My heart drops, half dropped because I was still in work mode and thinking of all the people I had to contact or try to at 4 a.m., and the other half thinking of this guy I'm on the phone with. It was an adrenaline shock, to say the least. Basically, what happened was he was driving along and going about 55 or 60 and hit this car head on. I get his story and everyone else, police, medics, you name it. The most messed up part was that this guy was an independent contractor. So that means he paid for his rig. It was his. He was just running our load. That was total. I get the police on the line, and they tell me what happened. I guess the guy committed suicide by truck. The first and only time I ever heard this. The other driver, who was only 30, was doing about 55, so you can imagine what his car looked like. Like he was facing a 10-year drug sentence and skipped his court appearance and swung over into the truck to kill himself. There was a suicide note in his top pocket. Now I felt bad for the guy committing suicide, but he also ended this truck driver's career forever. He was 55 and pretty much knew nothing else.
Catching 5 feet of air in a semi must have been pretty thrilling. Adrenaline, and when nothing was broke, even better. Great experience. By the way, this next story, awesome. One of the best ones I've ever read. Coming up next.
I used to be an over-the-road truck driver delivering to dollar stores all around the Northeast United States. It was fun for a while, but I eventually got sick of not really having a home. Anyway, one of my favorite stories. It happened, of course, when nobody else was around to corroborate the story. I was in the middle of the back roads of upstate New York, somewhere in the middle of the night. I'm going to say around 2 a.m. or so. I was cruising around 50 miles per hour or so. Since there were no cars on the road, was wide open. So I'm chugging along, fully loaded on the way to the first store, when I see what looked like a small bump. No big deal. As I got closer, I realized exactly how big this bump is, and the fact it's a raised railroad track. By this time, I was way too damn close to slow down at all. I swear to God, when it was all said and done, I managed to get at least 5 feet of air in that thing. After the shock of what had just happened settled, and I realized that I landed without breaking anything, I let out the most fulfilled screams of excitement as I had just gotten off the world's best roller coaster. My company obviously was never told of this one. I have many more stories if anyone wants to hear them. TL, DR, got 5 feet of air in a fully loaded semi. Good times. As a man that has reached the ripe old age of 48, I can promise you I've seen some shit go down. This one totally takes the cake for me though. I was waiting out front of a truck stop back in the mid-80s, sitting on a park bench with a guy that had a big Rottweiler kind of dog on a leash with him. I tried to make small talk, but he was quite sourpuss. So we sat in silence for a few minutes until the most unexpected thing I've ever seen happen right before my very eyes. While we were sitting there, a big 18-wheeler pulled in without a trailer, bobtail, so he parked right up front like a normal car would. Inside the cab of the truck was the driver as a little monkey, the dance for the organ grinder kind. I think they're called rhesus monkeys, perhaps. Well, the dog spots this little monkey and proceeds to go apeshit over it, lunging at the end of it with his leash and barking at the top of his lungs, generally making a real spectacle of himself, to say the least. The driver's obviously upset, but not nearly as much as the monkey is. Actually, upset may be the wrong adjective to use for the monkey, though. In retrospect, I think eagerly aggressive may be more appropriate description for his disposition. He was paddling the dashboard back and forth, never taking his eyes off the very aggravating dog. The driver opens his little triangle window that they don't make any cars anymore, the one made for smokers back in the day. He yells out to this douchebag to call his dog off because it's upsetting his monkey. The guy laughs and says, "No way. I told you he was a jerk, didn't I?" Says that his dog isn't bothering anybody. The dog hasn't shut up since he laid eyes on the monkey. I promise you, he's bothering everybody for several blocks around. Now here's where things start to get interesting. The driver says that if he doesn't call his dog off, he's going to let his monkey loose on that dog. Douchebag laughs and says that his dog would eat that monkey alive. Upon hearing this, the driver leans over and reaches into his glove box, I guess, pulls out one of those tiny baseball bats like you used to get at Astro World or carnivals and place it in the monkey's hand. The monkey obviously knows what's about to go down because he's now trying to squeeze out of the little triangular window I mentioned earlier. This monkey has murder in his eyes, if I've ever seen it. Driver hollers, "Last chance to save your dog's ass, man." In response, douchebag lets his dog off the leash. Now we have a situation that has escalated to the point where we have a dog jumping at the window and a monkey screaming profanities right back at him. Well, the driver finally rolls down the regular window and out leaps all kinds of miniature primate hell. The dog never knew what hit him. Quick as a flash, this monkey is riding on the back of the dog's neck. His 2 feet back are all wrapped up in the neck fur, with one hand hanging onto an ear. The other hand, as you may have guessed by now, is steadily and mercilessly raining down blows about the dog's head and face. I mean, hard blows. You can hear them. Whap, whap, whap. Well, it only took a moment for the dog to realize he was way over his head. He bolts, yelping bloody murder as he runs away at full speed. I mean, this dog is running so fucking hard, he's throwing up tufts of grass and dirt as soon as he leaves the pavement. The monkey was still riding him and beating him on the whole time. Douchebag acts like he wants to fight now. But several people, including myself, stepped in to stop that nonsense. In a couple of minutes or so, the little monkey comes loping back with his little bat still in his hand and leaps up into the still open window of the truck to await his master, who has gone on into the store. That wanker ran off to try to go find his dog, but I don't know if he ever did. My ride showed up and I had to go. Never again in this lifetime will I see something so totally crazy and unexpected like that. I'm both fortunate and humble to have been so privileged to be present for such an event.